Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for our live stream event, Exploring Character Modeling with Chaos Masons. My name is Josh Herman, I'm the Chief Creative Officer here at Gnomon, and it's a huge honor for me to introduce our guest today. But before I do that, I got to get some housekeeping stuff out of the way. So I'd like to thank Lenovo for sponsoring this event. Lenovo helps us to continue to bring free educational events like this to you. This live stream will also be added to our stream catalog afterwards, so you can watch it on our Twitch or YouTube channels afterwards. And if you are looking for closed captioning, that is only available via the Gnomon Facebook page. So if you need that, please go to the Gnomon Facebook page and you have that access. With that, I'm going to introduce our guest. Our guest is Marco Plouffe. He is an art director, character artist, and the co-founder of Chaos Masons. Marco worked as a character artist for THQ, BioWare, Eidos, and freelance for other major studios. Now he has his own company with Cédric Séaut called Chaos Masons, where they tackle outsourcing needs for clients and also work on their own versatile projects. Welcome to the stream, Marco. Hello. There you are.
I'm here.
Hi, we did it.
Nice to meet you all.
Yes, welcome to the stream. Super excited to have you here. I'm a huge fan of your work, and so I'm excited to see kind of some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and also some of your projects. I listed off a little bit of your bio, but I figure it would be cool to have you kind of talk through a little about yourself, to introduce yourself, maybe show off some of your work, and that'll kind of kick off some of the conversation.
Cool. Yeah, no problem with that. Jesus, where to start? I'm like something that actually I think is important is really when I actually decided to start the whole 3D career as a whole, because the reality is that I've actually been an artist for since I was like a really young kid, but I wasn't really I didn't go to like any school for that, so I didn't really have like an education. It's more like I was like self-taught, and it's not really like the best it wasn't the best way to really be like a well-rounded artist. But I always like loved drawing and that sort of stuff, and like now I have a kid and I see him like start to draw with a pen, like it's like nothing he draws, but I'm always like, oh, that's a beginning.
Yeah.
So my mom said at 2 months old, like supposedly I was like doing not 2 months, 2 years, I was doing like shapes and that sort of stuff. So I was like, yeah, maybe that was like inside of me. But the thing is, I've always been like passionate by like so many other things, like music and that sort of stuff. And at some point, when it was time to go to school for like to study in something, like where I come from, there wasn't really a lot of like schools or anything, and I wasn't really sure. Like the only thing that I knew is that I loved video games and art, but there was no like school for like art and video games. Like there was no Gnomon well, not even Montreal. I was not living in Montreal at that time. I was living like a city close to Ottawa, and there was like not even like really like art schools and or not a lot. But basically, I went somewhere else, and I ended up like hating my life. And then at some point, I realized, man, I think that I need to pursue what I was doing when I was a kid. So I actually moved to Montreal to study in 3D modeling, because by that time there was school that advertised this. And at first I wasn't sure if I was going to become like a concept artist or a 3D artist. And I think I went for 3D artist because they basically said it was like a little bit easier to access because there was a lot of needs. But I've always loved to design my own stuff. And even if it wasn't for the longest time, and it wasn't part of like my job description, like this is something I've always practiced on the side. Hence the presentation we're having today. But technically, I finished school. I didn't get a job right away. I needed to work some more. During when I was at school, I was even like working like beyond like what the school was asking me. Like at night, I was always like working on my own personal stuff, trying to sometimes redoing homeworks. That's so nerdy, but like I was actually like, I think I can do this homework even better. Like now that like I got the grade, I was like, yeah, let's do it again. And but I
That's how you
think
learn, though.
Yeah, it does. It really does, because like the moment that you actually like know how to do something, it goes so much better. Just a weird example, when your software crashes and you're like, oh, I have to like redo 10
Yes,
minutes of work. Well, that 10 minutes of work might actually take like just like a few like seconds, because you're like, okay,
yeah,
the roadmap of like how to do it is so clear in my head now. So let's jump
absolutely.
into it.
That pathway is like already there, and so now you can just follow it again really quickly, and like you've traveled that before.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah, I'd get a job right away. I needed to work like a little bit more, but at some point I got an opportunity to do a presentation at what we call the Montreal International Game Summit, which is the
Hmm.
Mega Migs. And because I was a beta tester on the ZBrush beta, basically I knew how the software was working, and they invited me to go to the Migs with the Pixelogic guys to just showcase the new tools, right? Even if I
Yeah.
was just like beginner, I knew the tool, so it was an asset for them.
Hmm.
So they gave me that opportunity, and this is like where like my relation with Pixelogic started, like from the beginning. And since then, I've always been really close to the guys. And but at the Migs, I met the person that gave me my first job, and it was at THQ.
Hmm.
David Giraud was the name of the artist. You might know that name. It's
Hmm.
a popular artist.
Yep.
And in at THQ, I actually met Cédric,
Oh, really?
and he basically like mentored me in a sense. Like he just liked me. I don't know.
You
And
guys hit it off,
and he
yeah.
was yeah, we hit it up from there. And even if like we parted ways, like at some point THQ was kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
rumors of closing, so I kind of like jumped ship, went to BioWare, and then
Hmm.
like he went to ADOS on the undisclosed project that never happened, but that was the greatest thing in the world. And he would kind of like convinced me to actually join him on this project before we knew it was going to get canceled. And um,
So you
so
both
so
joined, and
yeah,
then it ended up getting canceled.
yeah, well, he was already there. He convinced me to join, and then it got canceled, and then we were
Yeah,
put on some like on finishing the Deus Ex game.
right.
And at some point, like wasn't really sure what we're gonna do next. And by that time, Cedric was like, you know what? One way to touch to a lot of projects at the same time and not get canceled and everything fucks up is if you actually work for a mini project at the same time, like
Hmm.
freelancing.
Hmm.
And by that time, we were also already teachers. Like he was teaching in a school. He actually invited me to that school as well, where like I started to teach. And
Hmm.
we kind of like knew how to form people, how to like teach them and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So it was kind of like a natural process for us um, to start like an outsourcing company,
Hmm.
because we were like, okay, so we know how to teach people, we know how to make them do like the stuff that we do. There was a lot of people that wanted to work with us, and
Hmm.
we're basically like, look, all the pieces are there. Like we just
Absolutely.
need to actually have like an opportunity, and we can start it out. And started off, I mean. And basically at some point we had one to work on a project, and it was like a 6 months contract, and we were like, you know what, that's kind of like safe enough for us to do the
Yeah.
leap of faith and just like jump into that and to do
Yeah.
it for
And
real.
commit to
And
it.
from exactly, so this is exactly when we started when we started Chaos Masons. We basically had this chance, we took it, and it was kind of like pretty stressful, to be honest,
I'm
because
sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh yeah, you have a safe job and like everything is fine, but you're just like you want more, so you go and
Sure.
you take that risk. And it's the kind of situation like I gave my resignation letter, and like the next day I was like, I regret this.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think I may have made a big mistake. Maybe not,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well,
But
I
then you
think
realize,
that's
nah, it's just like voices in your head. So just like
yeah.
just go forward, go forward with it.
That's just fear talking. I think that's the perfect
Yeah.
segue to show some of your portfolio. So I'm going to pull that up right now. So this is your ArtStation page. It looks like you've just gotten several followers while we're talking, so that's great. But you have a ton of work. Like you were saying, you've been working on a lot of projects. You guys do a lot of personal work, from what I can tell as well. Uh, let's kind of scroll through some of what your projects are. Maybe talk us through that timeline, and then eventually, when we get to the top, I want to see some of the Four Horsemen stuff because I think that stuff is pretty amazing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, what you can see here is my personal art station. Like, and I mean, of course, this website, the Chaos Mason website, is something else that's actually worth showing, because it actually like showcases a lot of like what we can do as a company in many regards. But I mean, if we want to focus on like the stuff that I personally did, because I think that
Sure.
if we're going to talk about design, something that will be mostly interesting is everything that like I've put a lot of like design aspect into. Most of the work that we end up doing at Chaos Masons is a lot of like producing 3D assets, like characters. We do concept as like 2D, 3D. We do all the concepts and stuff. But like where I really get to really like showcase like my design passion is in my personal work. So I mean, if I scroll like down too much, like at some point it starts to become like pretty old for sure, but still like somewhat valid to not click the unpublish button yet.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, no, some stuff that I've worked on. I'll like this one here was like one of the pieces. That's actually the tutorial. That was one of the pieces that really like I think helped to like put my name out there. It was one of the first like hard surface piece that I did, just to show that I knew how to do art surface, because the rest of the art surface stuff I've learned it kind of like with Cédric, and I've perfected it while working at on the Deus Ex game. But at some point, like yeah, I wanted to do like something for that kind of like shows to people like, hey, look, I can do that, because I want that kind of work, which is exactly the mentality you have to have if you want like a job. And I'm going to say that as a recruiter, like I recruit people, right? So what I'm looking in, like in like an ArtStation page is basically what I'm looking for, in the sense that like if I have a project and it's medieval, well, I mean, I'm kind of gonna search for like somebody that has like medieval in his portfolio, and I try to look beyond that. I try to look at like the raw skills of the artist and adaptability and that sort of stuff. But it's actually really hard to do. And sometimes when you're like in the masses of portfolios, you want to actually like be able to showcase like stuff that you know you can do well, and people will come and get you for that. And that's the nature of everything. So if like I wanted to do robots, I made a robot, so that I actually been given tasks to do robot at the same time. So that's pretty much like why I did this piece here. But also at the same time, there's a lot of like what I do that's really just for fun. Like I remember like doing that piece at some point, and that piece I was like, hey, you know what, I just want to do something that I've never really did before, that's not really like exactly my style, just to explore and to have fun. And that's kind of like the centerfold I find of like me in designing for myself. It's really just like I'm always just trying to make myself happy. And even if like, let's say like the followers like are like, oh, you should do only robots and whatever, sometimes I'm like, hey, you know what, I'm doing a medieval character, because
This is what I
now
want
that's
to
what I
do.
want to do.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I remember this character here that I did it after like a streak of like doing like only robots for like I think 6 months or something, and I was like, my god, I don't think that I can design another robot, or else I'm going like something's bad's gonna happen. So I was like, you know what, scratch that. Like I'm starting like this like series of Mega Man characters that I kind of like reshape in like another universe, and it was basically just to have fun. And I was like, there's not going to be a single robot in there. And yeah, so that was just for fun. I love doing mashups. And when you see me doing like a mashup, it's because like I'm just trying to like relax for a second. I'm in between project. I'm just doing something like this. So no, yeah, I love doing that kind of stuff. So even if people know me as like hard surface guy, like the reality is I just love to do everything. And recently I posted also like finally like the sequel of my wasp. Like the wasp is this character I was showing here, and I finally did like a continuation of the series with this character here. This is like my newest one. Another one is coming on Monday, and
Ooh,
it's basically just me like continuing a series that was started 5 years ago, because people waited enough. And
Yeah, they've
I was
waited
like,
long
you know what,
enough. Yeah.
yeah, I'll do it this time. So yeah, no, that's it's pretty much that.
That's
Sometimes I
awesome.
just do like little portraits like this just for fun, like it's really like a quick little thing,
Yeah, yeah.
just to relax. But at the same time, one of the reason why this is something that I find that it's important, it's because it's kind of like a calling card for our company at the same
Hmm.
time, because like we advertise ourselves as like an outsourcing company. We work with many people, but like the thing that's important for Chaos Mason is like the quality that comes out of our company, and basically like this like is us showing like the potential of like what can come out of like a
This is what you're
relationship.
gonna get. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Plus you always have to be out there to be noticed, so like this is
Hmm.
why I've always been doing personal stuff. Well, I mean, no, I'm doing it to for fun because I like it, because it's my
Sure.
passion, but putting yourself out there is really like the thing that helps like the most. So if there's something like that aspiring artists need to know is, yeah, you need to like always produce like at a certain rhythm. Don't need to go crazy, but like just always be out there and
Yeah,
you'll get noticed this way. This is how I got noticed, at least.
for sure. We got a question from YouTube, which was asking: Is all of your personal stuff that we're seeing here, is it all ZBrush, Photoshop, and Keyshot, or do you use other renderers or
Oh,
different
well, I mean,
process?
at least for the sculpting,
Yeah.
it's always ZBrush for sure.
Okay.
Like the amount of time that I open another software is like so few.
Hmm.
Um, so like it's pretty much like always ZBrush. And the in terms of like compositing, like of course Photoshop, and in the
Hmm.
middle the rendering, that really depends. Like I've explored a lot of like different things. Like
What
for
one are you
example,
using a lot like right now? What's your favorite one right now?
well, right now I'm back to like testing some keyshot thing. I
Okay.
got like a whole old version of like keyshot,
Yeah.
and but for me it's like just enough to just to do like what I need to do.
Hmm.
But like for the longest time I was kind of like exhausted with like rendering time, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do everything with like composition passes from ZBrush.
Yeah.
I saw like a little tutorial by Raphael Grassetti, and I was like, yeah, I
Sure.
think I want to try this. So I did this character this way. This is done with just like ZBrush passes, so it's like no rendering time at all.
Right.
It's just all about compositing like all the passes yourself, which was actually like a fun exercise when it comes to like really controlling all the aspect of your render.
Hmm.
That was really interesting actually. Whereas like I'm also like experimenting with other things and that sort of stuff, and the which actually brings me to talk about the Four Horsemen, because
Hmm.
these guys here were so heavy. Like the mesh is incredibly heavy. um uh it's funny because it's the kind of question I get asked all the time. Is like, how many polys is your
Of course.
model?
Yeah.
And the reality is like I never know, because like who cares? Like I just create another ZTL when my first ZTL starts to be too heavy, and like at the end before doing the rendering, I might like merge the ZTLs together just to do like the rendering, because I will not have to do any sculpting or whatnot. But like this one I just checked for fun, and I think it's like between 300 and 350 million polygons
Oh,
each
yeah.
guys. Yeah, no, it's pretty bad.
That's
It's
a
pretty
lot.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what's the worst is that like it's very optimized. Like if you go too close to the model, you'll notice there's a lot of pixelation. Like I'm
Hmm.
very optimal with like my scenes. They often not weigh a lot just because of like how like optimizing I am. So if like, yeah, it could have been like much more than that. But yeah, no, it's I already knew that like if I was going to like print those characters, like they were going to be like of a certain scale, so I didn't go like too crazy on the detail. And that's not like for VFX, so you don't need to have like micro details and that sort of stuff. But if I was to actually have like all the micro details in my sculpt, I probably would go like up to like I don't I don't know, like
At least
500
four times
millions.
that. Yeah. Like if you sub
Yeah,
D at least one more time. Yeah.
yeah, on some of the meshes for sure. But all that to say that like since the mesh was like so heavy, I ended up actually rendering this in Substance Painter,
Mm.
and once again an old version of Substance Painter that I had, and it's basically just like rendering. It's a plane. Like what you're looking at is just a 2D plane with like normal maps and that kind of stuff, and material ID on it. So there's
Hmm.
no like 3D model for real. I just rendered like passes in ZBrush, and I put them in Substance on a plane, and actually Substance react the same way in like where it goes and gets like all the details of curvature and the normal map and the AO, the ambient occlusion. Even if it's a fake one, it still responds to like the darkness of the AO and that sort of stuff. So I was actually able to make all of these in Substance,
Off
and
of
also
a plane.
like off of a plane. Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy
Exactly.
though. That you,
Yeah, thanks.
it's like going from like I'm going to render in ZBrush and do all these passes, and I'm going to do Keyshot, and I'm going to do these passes, and it's like I'm just going to do it on a plane in Substance Painter. That
Yeah,
is one
exactly.
I've never heard that one. That's pretty
Yeah. Well,
incredible.
I mean, two triangle is faster to render than like 500
Sure,
millions or
sure.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But also, like, I also just so like, don't get me wrong. Like, this is not necessarily like a proof of like render of like this is more like a proof of concept. Like,
Mhm.
I just try to use like a software to render like colors and materials just to give an impression of like what it would be, right? But like, my goal is to have this printed. It's actually going pretty well. Like, I might have found like somebody which I can actually like produce this thing. So it's of course, like, there might be like some changes to the colors and everything, but for me, like, this is
Mhm.
more like something to put out there so that people might actually like be interested to be part of it. But we're gonna make it look like more like we're gonna work on it. Like, this is like a proof of concept, I mean, but also like
Well,
a 3D model to print.
for a proof of concept, it's pretty good to
Mm.
just show what it could look like. I think it's pretty solid with everything you've got there. So,
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think what I was trying to say is that like, I'm not going to actually like do as if I was like necessarily like a
right.
render master or that sort of stuff. Like, at the end of the day, I'm a like a designer and a character modeler.
Hmm.
Of course, I know how to texture and that sort of stuff, and I love to render because it's better to show your stuff rendered. But like, I
Hmm.
haven't never studied in any of that, so it's just like me trying to have fun and show my models in the best light possible.
Totally. So when you're doing this type of a work, as you know, you were doing your Mega Man one, and that's kind of and other what things you were doing that were sort of fan art or mashups or combinations and stuff. When you were doing the Four Horsemen at one time, you were saying you had done an initial project that was the seven. When you do a cast, how is it different than doing just a singular character?
Yeah, well, so there's like two ways that I like to work. There's
Hmm.
one that's really free form, and there's one that's actually really like prepared. And there's reasons why I work in two different ways. And one of the reason is because like, I actually am afflicted with like a lot of like anxiety as an artist.
Hmm.
Like, I think we all do. It's like, if you want to be an artist, you have to be like, oh, I have demons inside and that sort of stuff, like, it
Yeah.
feels. And mine is like, I have like a lot of imposter syndrome, but I actually have a lot of like anxiety when it comes to like working on an idea. And I've discovered the freeform approach because I needed to fight against this like feeling that I always need to better myself in each project. And like, nobody needs to better themselves in each project. Like, you can totally have projects just for fun, and and once in a while you can try to like push push it and push yourself. But like, I think that it's really important to have fun with your art as an artist, or else you might like lose yourself.
Yeah, I
And
think that's important.
I it's so important. And I've discovered this like maybe like a few years ago. And so all like what I was saying, all my Mega Man stuff is basically like me just like just doing something for myself, right? Anyways, so the freeform approach is basically the one where like nothing is prepared. Like,
Mm.
the only thing that I might know is like, hey, I want to do Finn and Jake from Adventure Time, but in my style. So like, this character that I shown here, or like, I might tell myself like, hey, you know what? It would be cool to actually have like Samus from
Hmm.
Metroid, but if she was in like Second World War. So
Hmm.
having her like really look, yeah, just like retro, let's say. Um, and so sometimes when I get like these things, like, it, exploration won't go really far. It will basically just gonna be me like getting a few like photos from Second World War, and just like looking at all the references and just like letting my mind actually like just imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like this, the shoulder, like all the armor is basically like tank armor. So I was just like, hey, let's get a whole bunch of like tank pictures, and I'll figure out like how to convert like the design of like how it looks with like the new material of World War II, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as long as like shape language is there, like big round shoulders, kind of like spherical, like the rest for me is just like changing the treatment. So, and I already know I already know what I need to do. I need to do Samus, so there's no like
Yeah.
big like questions here, right?
You know,
So
like your big
gathering,
graphics you need to hit, the iconic parts of the character, and then it's putting those themes and that reference points into it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Plus, like sometimes you just do like random searches, like World War II armor, and you don't even know
Sure.
what you're gonna get. But like I found like they
Yeah.
had like like prototype Kevlar padding during World War II, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh well, there you go. So that covers like the frontal like abdomen part. There, like I'm just gonna like add this. So while I'm in ZBrush, I actually just like try shapes with while blocking them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll go in ZBrush like soon, but um like I'm just gonna like try to shape it like a little bit, get like the pieces like in place, and I will actually design like this. So there won't be like any real like exploring like drawing first. I'm just gonna go straight in ZBrush, do it because I'm like, yeah, there's no really real goal. It's just this like little fun thing.
Totally.
Um, and so yeah, that's how I work. And sometimes I'll actually do something that's much more complex, like I'm actually going to do like exploration. I did that like a long time ago when I did this series of like the
Mm-hmm.
sinners, which are basically based on the biblical
Right.
sins, the biblical 7 sins. And I just wanted to create like a series of character that embody like the sins. And for that I actually made a little bit more of research in order to actually make them the same as when I did this series here,
Mm-hmm.
the Four Horsemen. Basically, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to start like something like a series of character. For me, it's going to be really important that they all have like something that glues them together, like a certain like logic or certain sense. I want them to revolve around something, like, and that something is like, it's nothing. That's something. Well, it's nothing if it's not just like the feeling that everything works together. And I want this to be translated to the audience when they look at it. And for me, I felt that like it kind of like justified taking some time to do some research in order to, well, first of all, know my subject better, but
Mm-hmm.
also know how people see this subject,
Mm.
like how it's been through the ages. Um, and then I give myself a lot of liberty at the same time. But like when I do something like this, I kind of like try to think for the viewer a little bit, and like knowing like how they're going to like perceive it, and if I'm actually able to like, if it resonates with people, that's, I know that I did my job correctly. So
Right.
I'll take time, and what I'll do is I'll actually just like open Wikipedia, and I'll start to just like write words that like inspire me, like keywords and that sort of stuff. I'll
Sure.
open a something here. By the way, some of you, like, it might your eyes might melt because it's like so not professional. It's just like a scrapbook like that I have on my side, plus like with so many typos and probably some French word here and there because it's just like train of thought, right? So whatever comes in my head. So I was basically like, okay, so sometimes I often start by naming my project. I'm like, what's a cool name that like, if like a cool name that like something like I would click on if it was like a Netflix movie.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay, some like something cool, like Neo Harbingers, the Four Horsemen, that sort of stuff. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of kitsch. Well, I mean, my whole project is really cheesy and kitsch in a sense. So I mean, that's not a problem. But I try to actually like find words and keywords that actually like inspire me, like some like power words or that sort of stuff. And also I try to make sure that they it makes like sense for like who each of them are. So like this is kind of like my one liner: post-apocalyptic dystopian android knights riding horrible mutant creatures created, made by our negligence, with each of their thematic catalyst weapons. So this sentence doesn't mean anything. It's a non-sentence at all. It's disgusting. But you know what? It's kind of like my I don't know what's the word in English or the expression in English when you just write the first thing that comes to your mind, like free writing, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, free form writing, or like
Freeform's a good
I'm not
idea. Yeah.
sure actually. Free form. So this is basically like when inside of like myself, like because I kind of like daydream about the project a little bit, and I
Mm-hmm.
really work with like how it resonates inside of me. And I will know if like an idea is good if like I get really excited about it. When I get excited about it, it doesn't mean that my project now like is good 100%. Like I kind of need to kind of like stress test it
Mm-hmm.
by like putting it like in place, and then seeing if it's actually still makes sense to me or if I start to see flaws in the idea. um, and at that point I might actually maybe kind of like ask myself, well, is it time to just reconsider the idea or should I push forward? But the idea starts with like just being excited about it.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to ask you a quick
for
question because I'm curious. When you have those
yeah.
ideas, do you write them in your phone? Do you have a sketchbook with you at all times? Are you like running to the computer? Like, what do you? Because if you're daydreaming, which I do in my projects as well, it's like I have to write this down somewhere. I need to capture this before it goes away. What do you do?
Yeah, I send myself an email,
Mm-hmm.
but like this is for like until I get home. And the moment that I
Yeah.
get home, it's I open my notepad and I
Yeah.
just start writing like keywords. And I know that the keywords will make me remember the feeling that I felt
Mm,
about the idea. Except if
got it.
I'm really, really drunk or high, and
Sure.
I try to chill in those moments. So like
Yeah.
normally it's when I'm sober and everything, and my memory is really good. So just writing the keywords often it just puts me back in kind of like in the place that I was. You have to allow yourself to be put back
Yeah.
in that place also at the same time, right? But I'll write some stuff on notepad. Like right now on my desktop I have like a little notepad because I'm writing something else right now, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just like a few like words, and like at some point I'll just reopen it and just like continue writing and
Yeah.
just like seeing what makes sense. But you see that's like the whole it's so different from when I talked about like making the Samus. It's
Mm,
like the Samus was pretty much like Samus World War II. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good
just like,
idea.
boop.
Let's go in
Yep.
ZBrush, and
Yeah.
bang, like right away, like figuring out the ideas from there. And it's not that one is better than the other, right? But for me, when I start something new, I kind of like need to have like some confidence in it, or else like I won't get the motivation or the passion. And
Yeah.
to get that confidence, I just need to first of all follow my heart, like I said. And the moment that I get this excitement about something, I just put it on paper and see if it actually makes sense. I kind of like put it on paper, then I see it at the as like third person. I kind of like dissociate from it and I look
Mm-hmm.
at it. And if I find that it actually does make some sense, now I know I'm like, okay, I think it was not a brain fart. I think there's like
Right.
an idea in there.
It's working.
So yeah, so like what I'll do is like for this one I know it was going to be 4 characters, so I just divided like my thing in like 4 things here, and I just like started with like a motivation, like
Mm-hmm.
war. Why like would like why war is war basically. And um at this point I kind of like had like an idea of like these guys are going to be androids. They're not going to be human. They're going to be like the next thing that brings the apocalypse.
Mm.
So who are the next to bring the apocalypse? And I thought it could be like our creations. So okay, so why would our creations like want to bring the apocalypse, the end of a time? And basically my idea is exactly like the same as like for example those who played Detroit, or there's
Mm-hmm.
so much novel that's written about like dystopian futures where
Sure.
like what we like the things we maltreated are actually like getting their vengeance or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So like this is where like this idea like spun from. And basically like I just wrote like their motivation, like war. uh it's a character that was created to fight other people's, well, the humans battles, and they end up fighting their own brothers, and for this reason they will actually like exert revenge on us by destroying our armies and making us defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Pestilence is a story of abuse and that sort of stuff. So Pestilence was not pestilent before humans did things to that
Mm.
android, and that android actually is gonna take the pestilence inside of them and like put it back in humankind, basically,
Right.
if you know what I mean. Famine is the story of like famine of maintenance, famine of love. So it's basically all of the robots that would actually feed us. Uh, but we don't, if we don't like maintain them, if we don't feed them, I mean, androids don't eat,
Yeah.
but like the metaphor is basically just like maintenance, right? So like it's basically androids that were just left to fucking decay because like we're not really like taking the time to help them while they actually do work to help us. So this is where like they would actually want to do this. And death is basically just the idea of controlling life, playing God with like machines. And you might say, hey, they're machines, they don't have a conscience, but hey, you know what, at some point they might actually have, when our definition of conscious is going to change. So
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing of like this whole arc of story was really inspiring me, and I was like, yeah, I need to put them into 4 distinct characters. So that's the motivation. Then comes like keywords like proud warrior, or is it going to be like an orc-ish character? Like war can be many things, right? But I just
Sure.
find like those keywords that inspire me, and from there is where I'm going to start the visual, like everything visual. So I'm going to have like thumbnails like this. Sometimes I don't do a lot. Sometimes I am going to do many. I'm going to just like erase them and like compile them on like another sheet, like here, like this. This one, you can see I was like, oh, I'm going to do maybe like try to do like 5 of them, and I did one, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go in 3D for this one,
Yeah.
because
You're
like
like,
at
I
the end of
think
the
I
day,
know
I'm a
where I'm
3D
going.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like go really far in terms of like his silhouette. It's pretty much gonna be like the most typical like humanoid shape. So you know what? Let's just go in 3D instead. So but I at least tried to have like a lining up of the 4 characters, because like I said, they need to all revolve around something, and they all need to actually serve their own purposes. And I really think in the matter of like RPG games, so who's like the attacker, who's the
Yeah.
long range, who's the mage, who's the like etc, like
The
the
role.
thief, that,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like I like to assign them roles like this, and it just like gives me even more like it gives them actually even more purpose. And with those purposes, there's like a sense to them, and with that sense I just get even more inspired, and it becomes like all exponential. And I just need to make sure that like they all have their individual things, but I know that this way they're all going to be complementary to each other. So so after that, right away, because like I love collectibles, and I often think in characters like with a pose, I will
Right.
actually do like little sketches of poses. You see, I explored kind of like a different animals for war while I was doing the pose compositions and stuff. Um, and like for a second I was like, oh, it's going to be a lion, and then at some point I
Mm.
was like, I don't know, like I want it to be a little bit more like beastly, so I went for a bear. That
Right.
was like what I went with. um so, and basically like then I'm going to actually try to line up like 4 together. Like these 4 here will basically be like, okay, well, this is like the composition I'm going to try at the very end, and it's going to change. Like for those who have seen this piece, like Famine is not writing like something like this anymore. Well, kind of, it's still like a worm shape, but like it did change like a lot. But like now I know that like this is something that I can actually like go forward with. And afterwards what I'll do is I'll basically try to just like resume my artistic vision with
Mm-hmm.
pieces that already exist. And because like the moment that I actually have this idea, like the title and like the one liner that explains the whole like series, of course I'll go on ArtStation, I'll go on my personal uh, like those folders of like
Mm-hmm.
art of images, and I'll just take anything that it inspires me. And sometimes it'll be something that doesn't even like have a place there, but it just like gives me like it resonates a little bit. Like for example, I knew that like Pestilence, like I wanted her to be like more like elegant. So like there's some stuff that I went and searched that was like not necessarily like hard surface, not robots, but it was just like some like feeling of elegance that I wanted to convey. So I'll dissect sometimes like reference that I have and try to understand like why this resonates like me.
Yeah.
It resonates like this with me, and I'll just try to translate it into like my blocking later, or my drawing, or that sort of stuff. So there's a bunch of images for the animals. There was like a few images as well. Sometimes it's sometimes it's like, yeah, there you go. The
What is that
splash screen it's from Doom.
I
It's when you
thought so.
finish a level
Yeah.
in Doom 1
Yeah,
or
I thought it
Doom
was
2.
from
I don't
Doom.
remember.
Yeah.
But like I was like, yeah, for some reason that really inspired me for Death, because I wanted his look, even if he was going to be a robot and the visual language of his armor was going to be somewhat like rigid and
Mm-hmm.
like straight and whatever. I still wanted it to be more like of like the necromancer of the
Right.
gang. So I was like, it needs like the armor needs to be like have some call outs of like skulls and that sort of stuff, and that for some reason that image reminded me that idea. So that image is right there just to remind me, like, don't
Were
forget
you
about
I'm just
this.
curious, were you searching for that image, or did that image pop up? You're like, I need the end of Doom screen. That is what I want on my
Actually,
reference.
yeah, it's the latter.
Yeah.
I was like, I
That's amazing.
I need it to be like kind of like necromantic, like if like the shape is melting with the
Uh-huh.
armor, and I was like melting. It's like Doom,
Yeah.
and I just went. And you know what? From there, actually, to be honest, I got super inspired by Doom, like the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And this here, you see, like this bottom here is maybe the most important of like this page,
Mm.
because this is like the summary of like everything. So, and you'll see that like there's actually references of
Yep.
Doom right here, because I was playing Doom at that time, and I was like, I just love the style so much. And even if it's not really going to look like Doom, what I'm going to do in the end, it's still like one of the things that drove a lot of my ideas, like the shape language of things was really important. And I always end up just reverting to my own style really easily when I work, even if I give myself an objective. But
Mm.
at least the idea is like right there, just to kind of like sum up what I'm trying to do and center myself. So there are androids, a couple of drawing of androids here who
Mm-hmm.
dressed up with metal plates shaped like human style culture. Like what I'm trying to say, it's like it's medieval armor, but
Mm-hmm.
it's made in a sci-fi-ish robotic manner. They're wearing synthetic clothing. They have like cool ass weapons, and they're riding mutants and stuff. I kind of like deviated from this here. I went more for like zombie than like
Like
weird like
creatures, yeah.
celestial creatures in the end,
Mm-hmm.
because I still wanted them to be grounded in reality. Like I wanted one to be a horse, the other one to be kind of like a snake, even if he's flying.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is a maggot, a huge giant worm maggot thing, and the other one is it's still like a saber-tooth tiger in that drawing, but it ended up being a bear, right? And the reason why I wanted to revert back to real creatures, it's because like I really wanted to the like the taste of like humankind to still resonate into
Right.
like who they are. So yeah,
Do you
and
do
from
all of
there,
this work? Sorry to interrupt. Do you do all of this work before you do any 3D?
actually, yes, I do. But like, you see, this thing probably like took me like, I don't know, like maybe cumulatively, because like often I
Mm-hmm.
work like just a few hours per day, but cumulatively probably like 2 days, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
already had my reference first, and so I was just like putting like taking from my reference folder, doing some like little doodles, and then like overnight I just get an idea, I come back to it, I just add to it. So like I said, cumulatively 2 days. So it's not really like that much time that I spent outside of the 3D before I actually got this. But once I got this, I really had like I knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And for a series of 4 characters, it was really important for me. So I'm not going to say like, hey, you need to do all of that to actually do something like I did.
Sure.
Like absolutely not. This is so personal. But still it's really something that like for me was important, just to get the safety, the confidence
Yeah, the
to move
confidence, like to
forward,
know where you're
right?
going. Like you were talking about with the mashups, like those existing IPs and the things you want to mash up together give you the confidence. In a project where you're creating your own thing, you kind of have to establish that before you go into it, especially if you're doing multiple characters. Otherwise, you might drift into different areas as you're exploring, which is part of the freeform thing you're talking about, which is fun, but it doesn't lend
Yeah.
itself to doing a larger group, maybe.
Well, especially when you want things to be tied together. Like when you do a freeform one-off thing, it's like if it starts with one thing and becomes like another thing, it's like, well, who cares? Who cares
Mm,
really? Because the goal is actually just to like to do something that you like and to chill,
right.
really. Um, whereas like if you actually like work for a client, now you cannot be too freeform.
Right.
It's what they want is what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you want to do like a series of something, I kind of like, for me at least, works better to prepare some things to make sure that like everything revolves around it. And the Four Horsemen, like I'm already working on the next group of like the next cast of character, which are going to live in the same world as the Four Horsemen are, but might be like the
Right.
opposing force, let's say. But and because I knew I was going to go in something even like deeper by adding another cast, I was like, you know what? I'm going to prepare behind the scenes even deeper.
Okay.
I'm going to write the lore of like the whole universe of like these characters. And I did that with a couple of friends. It was really great. We just brainstormed during COVID on Discord,
Mm-hmm.
was talking about like a few ideas here and there. And I actually have like, I got pretty much like 6 seasons of like episodes
Oh
and
wow.
like events that can happen and characters that come from them. And since I have all of that written, and there's like a kind of like high level, actually low level, like there's a
Mm-hmm.
foundational like sense to everything. And I know that like my casts of character, they're not going to pop out of like anywhere. Like they have a place in the world, and the world, the way it's shaped, makes sense because of like everything makes sense together. And I know that because I written the things and I gave myself like permission to just like be critical with it and look at it like objectively and
Mm-hmm.
say like, okay, if I was to actually see that as like a series, would I find it credible? And if it's not, it's okay. You just like start or change some stuff. But I think it's like important to just look at things like from afar a little bit. And
Totally.
because I have like all this lore thing now, I'm like, okay, you know what? Any cast of character that I do, like I can just do the same that I did with the Horsemen,
Mm.
but I'll know that they will fit in their world respectively.
Like yeah.
And I'm super excited by that. Like this might become like one of my big like project for like the years to come, because and I don't know even know if like something's gonna happen with that, but I mean I don't know, it could be really cool. Like I feel really strongly about this, and I'm really attached. So
That's awesome. Well, let's
yeah,
dive into one of them or a couple of them. I'd love to see you were showing me before, but I'd love to look more at the models, or at least one of
yeah.
them, and talk a little
So
bit about the creation of them.
yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the characters. That's Death. You'll notice that the horse is a decimation. Well, not a decimation, but a dynamesh, because, like I said, this scene was so heavy that I was like, if I am to put the character, the horse, and the base together in one scene, it'll be so impossible to work.
Mm.
And I mean, I have a pretty good computer, but like at some point there's like a limit. So.
Yeah.
This is pretty much like the entire scene, but the horse and the base is like a decimation.
Oh yeah.
So I dynameshed everything together, and I decimated it while keeping the poly paint, just to have like a sense of like separation of elements.
Mm-hmm.
But like everything is there, so I know that if I place all of them together in the same scene, they'll all be like flush with each other. And this is how I work for a lot of things actually.
Awesome.
But the death here, that's actually the actual finished model. Maybe actually, you know what? No, there's a version where I added like a few like scratches or that sort of stuff, but yeah, not on this one.
I'm gonna
And you'll
change
notice
around our
that.
picture so people can see it a slightly larger.
Yep. Sure, that's cool. And also, like this character, I already knew that I was going to work. I was going to try to print it, and just to give myself a chance to not like necessarily printing it in the biggest like format, and maybe give myself the chance to explore like smaller format, so smaller cost for buying at the same time. I actually did the details on this character to actually work with like smaller formats as well, so you won't see like fabrics on the cloth. There might be like memory wrinkles and that sort of stuff, but the idea was to actually have details that can pop out if you actually print it pretty small. And I did a couple of like prototypes
Mm-hmm.
with my 3D printer, just to see if like it would actually like work well. And like, oops, like for example, like it's probably like going to be too blurry for the screen, but like I kind of like,
Mm-hmm. You can kind
come
of
on,
see
get
it.
in focus.
It's
Yeah, it's
working
not
on
in
it.
focus though.
It's trying. Oh,
There you
there it
go.
is.
so I did like a couple of like test print with my my Form 2 that's behind me, just to see like how it would look if I was to actually print it. And that way I can prototype it, make sure make the changes if needed, and that sort of stuff. But so yeah, no, that's the character here, and that is of course the character in pose. So before I do the character in pose, of course the character is going to exist unposed, like here. So um, a question that I get asked often about like posing a character is like, when do you actually like, do you do everything before posing it, or some stuff you're going to do later? And the answer is pretty simple. It's like, well, is there going to be symmetry on it, or is it going to really be affected by the posing later? And for example, like the cape of the character, or at least like the bottom of the character here, there was like no reason for me to model it like in that shape, because I knew that later the cape would actually like have its own personality and composition and everything. So the for me, the cape, I was like, I'm just gonna do it like one time at the end, and it's gonna be already like in pose, and that's going to be much much simpler this way.
So you
But
had
a
like a
lot of like,
placeholder, and then once it was in the pose, it was going to be way more dynamic than it was going to be in
yeah,
the
exactly.
default
Plus,
pose. Yeah.
like the shape was going to change. Like I knew, like I was really inspired, but like by the cape of Spawn,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, the cape is probably going to have its own personality. So I don't want to necessarily like choose the design now. Like the design is going to be according to the composition of the character. Just to go back here, like the composition is really like the movement of the spear going to the cape and back to the legs and then to the head, and this like it spirals into the center of the piece here. um, and the shape of the cape I knew like was needed to like reflect this, but also like offer like a certain like shape or whatever. So I kind of like had an idea of maybe of what it would be, but I was like, it's going to be so sensible to the pose later that I'd rather just do it at the very end. But there's a lot that I could do uh, without the pose, and it's pretty much like everything else of the character. Some things are not really like made symmetrical necessarily, but the general composition of the character is still like symmetrical. So this character exists like this, the same way that the horse also existed. Actually, you know what? I'm going to open the horse file here.
I was going to ask about the horse, if you did that one in like T pose. I don't know, maybe that's not the right word for a quadruped, but in a base
Yeah, exactly.
pose.
T pose,
Yeah.
like downside E pose, or
Yeah.
something like that. Actually, something else that I do that's actually a great example to express what I'm going to say is that often what I'm going to be doing is, if I know that the character is going to be like in a very, very like uh, a pose with a lot of personality, I might actually find like the equivalent symmetry for this personality. So like a horse kind of like not jumping back, but like leaning back. If I don't know how to call that,
Bucking.
bucking, I guess. Yeah, exactly. It's the pose from the famous Napoleon painting. That's like where I took that from, right?
Rearing.
Rearing. Let's call it that. So you'll see like when this is going to open. Oh, it's not even opening. You'll see that basically like he's like in that pose, but like if it was symmetrical. So I know that like the only thing that I would need to do is like to place him afterwards. And by the way, quickly, I just saw like a question in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm not really looking at chat because I'm so like focused on my
No,
stuff,
that's
but like I
okay.
just saw quickly somebody asking about transpose master. And yeah, basically it's transpose master. Like, but something that's important to know though is that I'm going to like pose my blocking first, and I'll show that afterwards, because I want to know where I'm going first. So you see like the horse is
Oh, I
already kind
see.
of
Yeah,
like,
you were
he's
already
symmetrical.
sort of in the pose
Yep.
ish.
Yep. But the only thing that I need to do is like one leg step forward and one arm step, just to have like a better like composition. Because like now, like for example, like the two legs are overlapping on each other on my keyframe. Like let's call this my keyframe, key angle, whatever, the key composition. So like, yeah, of course, like I made changes according to that, but like everything's here, like symmetrical and that sort of stuff. And when it comes to like the center of the character, I try to not have him like too symmetrical, but you
Mm-hmm.
see like the teeth are symmetrical right now. But after I posed it, I actually reshaped some of the teeth to break that symmetry.
Oh,
It's just that like symmetry helps so much, it helps to go faster, that I'd rather do it
yeah.
symmetrical and kind of like change one side afterwards. Um, and sometimes during the posing as well. But yeah, that's basically like how this is. But to answer the question about the actual like posing, I'll pose the design first. So for example, I'll show you. I'm kind of like working backwards. I'm realizing.
It's like a cooking
Anyways,
show. We're seeing the final product, and now we'll see the ingredients.
yeah, exactly. But if you look at that, this is my blocking. I'll remove the gray for a second. So all right, so there you go. So like this was my blocking. This was what I had before I started polishing anything. So everything here was made first of all in their own scene and then was posed like this. So if you actually like go from one to the other, or if I was to actually like have both in the same scene, oops, not this one. So okay, well it moved, so the illusion won't be there, but you can see that basically. I see. I'll just do this for a sec. There we go. So you see that like this is like the same pose. Like though I've moved the horse a little bit. There's some like differences for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but these are actually like I made I posed the blocking first because I really wanted to have my final composition before placing the actual character. So
Right.
this is how I actually managed. So now that I
How
have like
far,
this.
like, I was gonna say, sorry, how far into the process do you do that, like that pose? Like, it seems like the
Uh,
character and the horse are pretty well resolved, but are you doing like, is there like I do a primary pose, like I test it several times? I'm curious about that back
Well,
and forth.
I'll start from this here. I'll just find
Okay,
it. Like you
sure.
see, like those are like the T posed. Those are like the T posed character.
Mm-hmm.
When I was exploring the design, like this is the final file, so like it probably doesn't
Oh
have
yeah.
all the junk that I try when I'm exploring like many designs. But like this is like death before I started to make him like to polish him.
You keep them all
So
in
you
the
see,
same
like there,
file.
yeah, I keep on the same file because
Interesting.
like something that I like to do is I like to be able to do this here. So just for example, oops, okay, there we go. So okay, so I can do this, then I can do this, then I can do this here, and then I
Mm-hmm.
can do like this here. And this way I can actually like really easily like shuffle from one to the other. Because since I'm going to want them to be kind of like different, like like the Slender Man long
Mm-hmm.
dude, the big buff war character, like I want them to have like really like a different silhouette. So I'll actually make sure I can actually quickly change between one or the other in
Mm-hmm.
ZBrush. And sometimes I'll even like have them as like different subtools so I can just like change really quickly and compare them in terms of like their scale and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I actually tend to just have them all in the same scene. And so yeah, they're all here. Like this one probably doesn't. You see, this one doesn't have any like hidden subtools, so like it doesn't have a couple of the things I was going to explore. But you can see from War that I was actually exploring the idea of having like
Mm-hmm.
some like thing at the back, like ornamental, kind of like call sign on his back. But at the end, I just found that there was like maybe like too in some angles there was just like too much noise with that, so I just like let it go and kept him just like with a cape. Um, but yeah, so this is basically going to be like my blocking. Um, you can see that there is like something of like a base model,
Mm-hmm.
and for this one, I actually since this one was going to be kind of like all of the same person, well, android, taking different routes that actually portrays them as different horsemen. I actually wanted them to all share like the same kind of like infrastructure. Like in the world that I was envisioning, androids would actually be like done like in a like monopoly, like
Yeah.
sorry, like one company would design like the Android, so like their design would be really similar. So in terms of like what it means on how they're actually made, I actually wanted to have the base of what they are already constructed. So kind of like a dissection of like what it would look like if they were like skinned, basically,
Yeah.
right? So right now it's basically just missing the skin and the fat pouches, but it has like pretty much like somewhat of like the infrastructure that's like under it. So kind of like the synthetic muscles, some like fascia or like cloth grouping to just keep things together, some bones sticking out, and of course like this is not trying to be realistic. This is trying to just like take design like decisions basically. So if I want the ribs to stick out for it to look more like skeleton-y because it's death, well, hey, that design surpasses like real life common sense in that aspect. Sometimes it's important that like real life wins over design, but for what I was doing, I'm doing fantasy. At the end of the
Right.
day, it's a fantasy project, right? So like sometimes I'll just go in that direction. Same thing for like the skull. The skull has really like a kind of like morbid-esque like look to it. It's not like a real human skull. It has like angles also and stuff just to make it look mean by nature. That was like a design decision more than just like practical. So like I started with like this base, and then like everything was like on top, like you see. This is basically like what's hidden. Sorry, what's not hidden by the armor and everything.
Right. So
And
did you start with the base and then start sculpting individual pieces on it, or did you start building like what was like your
yeah,
next step?
well, I
Oh wow.
duplicated the model.
Mm-hmm.
So like, okay, I eventually I deleted the head, but this is like a duplication of the model, and I just push inward and outwards to
Mm-hmm.
make like the shapes and that sort of stuff. So if I was to like explore the idea of having maybe like more like ribs coming out, like it would be like as simple as just like taking
Mm-hmm.
my clay build up brush and adding volume. Okay, so now it's like coming out like this, and I would do this, maybe grab dam standard and just doing like a little bit of like pushing like this. So, and this would be enough for my blocking to explore, like in terms of design, if I like this or not. And I could actually have them on a layer. I didn't put it on a layer, but like I could have had it on a layer to turn it on and off to see like what I preferred from before and after. But the reality is that it's really just a question of like, okay, so if you want to do like a layer on top of what's existing, I've always found that the fastest way was just to duplicate your object and push in and push out, and
Yeah.
just to get like your main shapes. Of course, you won't be able to do stuff like negative space and that sort of stuff, but that is things you can actually just like figure out and add on like later basically. But yeah, this is how like I worked, and you'll see that often it's all made in like one piece. Like this is really like all one piece, so it's just a question of like the same, like the technique that I use all the time, which is you first add mass, then you do the edges.
Mm.
So mass, edges, and then surface. And what I mean by that is for example, if I was to like start from scratch like this armor here, I'm just gonna like destroy it. Or if I started from scratch, I'm just gonna replicate like a bit of what I did. Like I knew that I wanted to create like a skull here.
Mm.
So first I'm going to, well, yeah, an extra step. I'm just going to kind of like draw like the outline of like the line flow that I'm looking for. So like this is not something that I want. Maybe I want like the eyes of the skull to be here. Maybe I want, so something like I'll draw like something like this, and from the get-go I'll know like, okay, well, is this going to look weird? Or probably like right now I haven't done it as well as I did before, but the idea is like the line is there, the placement of the things are there. So once that I have this drawn, maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try to start to like add separations for the elements. So this is simply going to be done by like adding mass like this, and sometimes like I'm still in clay build up, I'll just like create some false like cavity or whatever, still with clay build up. And so this is basically just adding the volumes, and then I'm going to add the contours, the edges. So with like dam standard, but we're using with alt, it creates like this pinching here that like when you use on the corners, it basically just like rounds off your detail. And if you do it really like strongly, you even have like this lip, which actually works well for armors to have like a change of angle before like the end. So I might actually keep that. But if, for example, I didn't want to keep it, at some point, what I would do is now surface. So adding mass, one, making the edges, two, and then three is like reworking the surface. Like if you feel that you don't want this, at that point, I'm gonna like go back and just like make sure that my surface here is representative of like the look that it's supposed to have. And I'll always work this way to model like everything when it comes to the blocking of my character. Um, Even when I do hard surface, like this is what I'm going to do. Like the art surface is going to come like at this point here. If I decide that this is supposed to look like a like hammered armor, like an organically hammered armor or like a manufactured armor, it's just going to be how much like clean the surface looks and like how like surgical the angles like are and that sort
It's
of
like
stuff.
surface treatment and planes versus like
Yeah,
film
planes.
development. Yeah.
Yeah, especially planes, because like you'll probably want to have like no artifacts in the surface. So I might take something like H polish and kind of like flatten everything like this until like it kind of like gets a very, very like clean treatment. And the moment that like the thing is like really clean, so you see I'm just like stroking it, stroking it in that direction, then in that direction a bit, using either sometimes alt, sometimes I don't use alt, because alt is kind of like gonna like push like outward like this, whereas not alt is kind of like gonna dig. So I kind of like do both. So it kind of like pushes, pulls, pushes, pull, and I always stay like there as a surface. And at the end, if I find that like maybe I flatten my surface a little bit too much, I'll use the move brush to just kind of like give it like the curvature that I might have lost like this. So this is how I'm going to go about designing everything while I'm actually doing the blocking here. And the later I'm going to do the hard surface modeling based on my shapes here.
Got it.
But
do you ever use Sculptris Pro? Do you use subdivisions? Is it Dynamesh on this part, or is it all? Does it depend on the project?
It's well right now. This just so happens to be just like the topology
The
of my base
duplicate.
mesh. But like I will often just use Dynamesh when it comes to, especially when the shape changes too much. Like right now, I'm lucky because like these elements, well, they are like the elements that are pretty much like stuck to the character, like the first level of layer. But when it comes to the second level of layer, like I might actually have like an extra mesh, and that mesh, since it won't have a topology, I'm going to use Dynamesh. So you can
Got it.
see Dynamesh here is pretty much like the fastest thing for when it comes to shape exploration, at least, right? I'll often change the topology to something cleaner when I'm doing the high res, but in terms of you like working for the design, I'm trying to use the quickest thing possible. Like I want nothing technical in my way when I work on the design, because it's just about finding like the proper like the proper silhouettes, the proper like line flow of everything, or the actual like design of each element and that sort of stuff. And I used
Totally.
polypaint. I use polypaint to really differentiate some of the materials, especially like on this character. There's like two levels of gray, three levels of gray. Sorry, like white is bone, well in quotes bone. The darkest is going to be synthetic muscle, and the other one is going to be like fascia or like cloth to hide it. So I use the tone colors to break materials into different things.
Nice. Speaking of trying to not be technical, one thing that often I find people get stuck on technical with is the cloth. So how do you get into like a character like this that has a hood and like sort of the scarf and a cape, which is a huge design element? How do you
Yeah.
block those out?
Well, like the cloth is really just like it's okay. of course, this is a blocking. There's no simulation yet on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, simulation, I kind of like use half of like the ZBrush simulation tool, but sometimes I'll just like go into like, once again, a super old version of Marvelous that I have, just to
Mm-hmm.
have like something that falls on his shoulder like
Right.
really easily. Like the hood, I did it in Marvelous just because it's so easy to just like make like a hood. It falls on its head, and then I take that and I go back in ZBrush. So I stay like in Marvelous for like 15 minutes
Yeah.
almost, and then I take that and then I work it in ZBrush because I just don't like the.
Just to get like the initial shape of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just because like it really like I have an understanding of like how gravity affects shapes, whereas like no mass is lost, so it's always just like pushed in a direction, and you have to compensate like somewhere else. So when I sculpt clothing by hand, like I have like the tools that I need to do something like somewhat credible. Um, but sometimes when it's like there's stuff that are so easy just to simulate quickly, that I'm like, hey, why not just use like the tool at my disposal? So I'll just like whip up like that old Marvelous and just do a little thing quickly. But in terms of like designing, like for cloth and that sort of stuff, of course, like clothing, I'm going to work the same way if it's like on the character. But for things like the scarf here, often I'm just gonna want to add like a mesh really quickly. Um, like adding mesh on the character is like a step by itself that
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have like really quick ways to go by uh to go at it, I should say. And for example, like if I was to actually like have nothing here and I wanted to explore the idea of having like a scarf, what I would probably do to have like a mesh here, knowing that it's going to be something that doesn't really have a thickness, is I'm going to actually just grab any mesh that I don't have a subdivision level on, and I'm going to use that tool, curve strap snap, which is basically like you draw something and then you have like this mesh like in
Mm-hmm.
place. So let's say you want it to go like all around the character, just like draw it, then oops, you see, just like continuously does it. I separated it in two meshes when I designed it first, but you can absolutely like have it as like one single mesh like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that I have this like this, the goal is going to be to separate it into like two different poly groups. So there's many ways of going at it, but the way that I use it is with my shortcut. I'm going to first hide it, like since this is like by default masked. There's something that just masks that puts
Mm-hmm.
invisible everything that is masked. So for me, it's like the F button, and then I do split hidden, which just like splits everything that's hidden. So Control Z for me, and now I actually have this as like its own shape here. And from there, I can basically just like do whatever I want with this mesh.
Yeah. Now
So
you have a great
I'll
base mesh.
yeah, exactly. Like since it doesn't have any resolution here, like what I'll do is probably add resolution on this face there. I have like a quick access to oops. I have a quick access to Z modeler to just like add topology here, the other side as well. And like this, I can already like subdivide and start like moving and placing like
Mm-hmm.
this. So like I'll always try to have like the quickest way to add a mesh on my character in order to like add props and that sort of stuff. So like that process now can take time, like to just get like the right shape and everything. But like whatever you place it, at some point you'll need to add volume on this. So divide it a bit more. Clay build up, always the best tool for me for adding volume, right? And if you're working on something that's thin, this is going to happen on the other
Mm-hmm.
side. So just have your back face mask at the ready in order to not influence the back of your mesh while you work. So there's something, of course, there's like a good reason to spend some time in ZBrush to kind of like know of like all of its like little features. And what I do is I always, each time there's like a new feature, I have it on the top here of my UI as a reminder to like, hey, don't forget about that tool. Maybe it's
Mm.
going to change your workflow or that sort of stuff. So it's always visible here. Um, in case I need to try something or whatever. And the yeah, so often all the tools that I'm going to be using are always hidden in like custom menus here. And this tool I'm going to keep visible, it's either because I need to know if it's on or off, or it's that it's a reminder to like, hey, explore more of that button here, or explore more of like whatever simulation and that sort of stuff. Anyways, well, little trivia thing here.
I like that though, that where all the new tools that come out, because it's so easy to just fall into the trap of like working in the way you always work, but kind of pulling it off of the shelf and putting it in a place where you're always going to see it and be like, oh, that is a tool. I should probably try that at some point. Like should explore that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. It's and it works because like I sometimes I'll look at it and I'll just try it, and at some point it becomes like something new. Like when I started to explore polygroups,
hmm
I was like, oh, that's technical. I don't want to do that. And at some point I realized like, oh my God, there's so much control, and it's not really in my way also. So
hmm
yeah, it's yeah, exactly. I just saw another question pop asking if like the mesh is riggable. If I do collectibles, I tend to just not really bother about that. If I can place it and nothing is really in the way, that's all that I need to actually like create the illusion that it's actually workable. But if I actually was to have this guy animated, what I would do is I would send the blocking to like a rigger or an animator. Well, make like a what we call a proxy mesh or a proto mesh version, like something that you can put in an engine or you can have in Maya or Max. That's not going to crash because it's too high in Polygon. So I'll have like a proto mesh version of it. And I'll have it tested by an animator, and they'll tell me if it works or not and what I need to be careful about. Having worked with riggers often, like I kind of like have a sense of what they're going to say. But when I work for myself, I'm like, okay, I don't have to answer to anyone. So as long as like the illusion is
yeah.
there, I'm good with that, basically. You know?
You did get one question about posing again, since you were kind of
Mm-hmm.
at the state of where you have basically nearly a final character. Somebody wanted to know how you pose your characters without losing detail in forms, especially hard surface stuff. Like, how concerned are you with squashing and stretching of shapes and stuff like that?
Well, first of all, I mean, everywhere that there's going to be flexion, I try to make sure that there's like something soft. So like I won't like whatever. But like if I work with robots and they have like articulation and everything, I'll basically like do kind of like a test where like I'll actually have like the arm with like a cylinder, and I'll have things rotating around the cylinder to know like how much like he can actually move like his arm, and I'll know if like I need to create more like room for the movement.
Mm-hmm.
um I would probably need to open another character to kind of like
That's okay. I think it's
answer
good to
this
know that you
question.
you have it's part of your workflow, right? It's basically you're saying like it is something you think about. There was other questions about do you follow, how much do you think about form versus function, which you had kind of talked about. Sometimes it is a
It's
fantasy world and you
it's an
break from
illusion.
that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm just trying to sell the illusion. I'm not trying to make it work really. And because I actually do this stage where I'm going to block the I'm going to pose the blocking, I'm going to actually know if like something needs to change. Like for example, like in this character here, like this part of like the helmet, like of the shoulder was like penetrating like a lot around the neck. So I actually like shortened the like the hole so that like I could place it back and like it would fit like with this shape. And if done well, the illusion is sold and there's no like real problem. And also something that like people might not know, but like I really don't shy from like taking my hard surface piece, let's say like um this whole shoulder piece. Oops, I'm actually opening the wrong file. Well, whatever, I'll take this one here. Like this whole like shoulder piece here, like this is actually um, untouched, but like seriously, there's nothing wrong sometimes into like taking like the move brush like here, and like if it needs like a little like push to the side like
yeah,
this, it's like, can you really tell that now it's like kind of like
right.
skewed? It's like not really. So, and like places like around the shoulders and the neck, often like I'll cheat that. Even like an helmet that on one side it's like skewed. Like this character, actually, this character here has two heads, right? There's like
hmm
this version here of the head, and like the whole like neck piece here is kind of like skewed. And like in if I
Yeah,
actually like show it like this, you can see that there's actually like it skews a little bit to the right here. But like in the ensemble of everything, it's the kind of stuff you don't really like notice because of everything else. So like that doesn't really bother me. Like as long as it's not really visible. Like something that would be visible is if, for example, like you do like if you shorten it like this, and then you have like those like circles that are now ovals. Like this is kind of like telling that you've actually like squished it. So I'll go
Right.
and probably like just like make them like
Right.
circles again, because it's really just like the primary shapes that betray this kind of like
Yeah.
changing of the shapes, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Right angles and circles. Do you do like the undersides of things as well, or is it just what's seen? Do you like the bottom of the shoulder pad at all, or is yeah? That's what I expected that
Yeah.
you didn't, but I was curious.
Yeah, there are so many characters that they don't have a back, like
Mm-hmm.
the like this this character here. Like I knew I was going to probably just make like a key image, and not really like turn around it too much. And
Yeah.
like he doesn't really have a backpack. He has like something on the side here, and like that's it. There's
Yeah.
no, yeah, there's nothing there, because this is also something I'm one of my philosophies is efficiency. And if something is not, if like I'm going to ask myself like what's the real end game for what I'm doing, and if I don't find a reason for it, often I just don't do it. It's the same reason why like, well, why I haven't this is like this is supposed to be like some kind of like synthetic material. Why isn't there like a fabric detail of the synthetic material? But it's because I'm like, well, first of all, in terms of render, I'm not really going to go really like close, because the idea is more like the ensemble of things. Plus, if I'm going to print it, this fine detail is probably going to be only visible if I print it in like 1/3 and 1/2, which is like crazy size, and that's I'm, it's not
Be
really there.
huge.
There's no really
Yeah.
purpose for it. Yeah, exactly. Is there another question by any
Yeah, there's a bunch.
chance?
There's people were asking about your renders, which you were kind of talking about that earlier. You actually did the final renders in Substance Painter, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, People are definitely interested in your approach to different ways of sculpting. Some people are interested in your approach to something that's like anatomy or something that's organic as opposed to hard surface. Just like general thoughts on that.
Well, that's a good question, because the reality is that I don't really ask myself that question before I start. Organic or hard surface, it's just a question of what's going to be the surface treatment at the very end. Because I would approach like creature design the same way that I would approach like the shape of something that is hard surface. Like this thing here, um, when I actually worked on it, like this could basically be, I think this was actually like a skull that I did in the past, like this part here. And I just took like a skull and I placed it, and I just like trying to find like the shape of the shoulder, how I wanted it to be. But you can kind of tell that I was going in a direction of hard surface because of my visual language, my choices of like shapes, like capsule, like a capsule shape like this is very futuristic shape. So I'm not going to like, it's not really going to reflect something that's like medieval or that sort of stuff, or like those kind of like line movement that are like very like angular is very sci-fi as well.
Hmm.
So this is kind of like telling that I'm going for sci-fi, but the reality is that in terms of like the treatment, there's no hard surface treatment or organic treatment yet. Like this could remove like the visual language that I put. This could be like a carved metal piece, right? It's really what I'm going to do like at the end that's going to make it hard surface or not. And in that case, it's really just a question of like making sure that if like light reflects on it, I'll just like, for example, put it all in gray. I'll put like a very like the way that light reflects on it, the shape is very clean. Like it doesn't have like, it's not wobbly like in some areas. It's like curves are not really like changing shape drastically. It has like a certain like constants to it and cleanliness. um I don't do always things perfectly clean, but I'm trying to hit the visual language. And hard surface, the visual language is clean surface. And
Right.
if you have that, you pretty much like are selling the thing.
It's still
So
kind of an illusion. You were saying that earlier, like the illusion of is it is it clean?
yeah.
Is it not clean? Is it a you know?
Well, it's like take two images. Like one is like a shoulder in metal, like like a medieval shoulder, and the other one is like that kind of like shoulder. And you put it just in gray, even then you can tell by the sheen, like the material. But like if you try to remove like a lot of like hints of like what the material is, you can actually just like start to dissect like aspects of like what makes something look sci-fi, what makes something look hard surface, what makes something look hard surface but medieval, like done with a hammer. And it's
Right.
basically like dissecting and observing those things is gonna actually like help you to know what do I need to achieve in order to sell or create the illusion, basically. So this is like what I actually like, what I do. So you saw when I was actually drawing like this shape on the blocking of my character, like it was very, very rough. I'm just figuring out, I think it's this one here. Yeah. So
Hmm.
like
Yeah. How do you
this
go from
shape,
that to that?
yeah. So basically like the idea is like this, and you see I also changed the design a bit. Like I thought this was too much like noise here, so I kind of like cleaned it. So basically when I do something like this, it's like the first thing I'm going to do is just like try to separate the object from the blocking. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like this character here. I'm just going to clone this here. So I'm going to try to get like that shape in the middle here. Actually, I'm going to keep this like here like this. All right. So I'm going to basically just like mask, like, oops, I'm going to mask the outline of the shape just with the mask brush like this. Here there's something over, so I'll just like draw like this here. And once I have this, I'm going to just press on my F button, which will hide everything that is masked. Actually, I'm gonna revert the masking first. And then I have like this object here. Since I created a separation here, if I do auto group, like I get like a different poly group for the center here. So now I have the center that is like this. I'll grow my selection in order to get a little bit closer to the actual edge, which is pretty much like this here. And I just delete the rest. There's subdivision on that mesh, so I remove subdivision. I will delete this, and now I have this piece here, which will be the base for this here. The first thing that I'll do is I'll actually just like clean all the detail, because I'm gonna want to just have like a first like pass of the surface here. So since my masses already existed because of the blocking, I can pretty much just like go right into like hpolish to just try to really get my shapes. Like I'm gonna try to have my shapes very well readable, well separated. And if I need to separate some more, like this like thing bothers me here, I'm gonna take like other tools like clay or like dam standard, maybe lower the intensity, and then standard maybe to insist on the cavity more, um like really like insist on like this is a separation here, and then hpolish like this, just trying to get my surfaces relatively clean. And this is something that I will probably do like I'll spend probably like 4 times more time than I'm doing right now in order to get it really clean. But the idea is just doing that. Hpolish, sometimes smooth will melt your surface and it will collapse it a bit, so you have to be careful with that. Except if you're using smooth relax, which is using smooth but removing your finger from the shift button before moving. This tends to smooth your object without really collapsing the shape, which is another good trick. But like, yeah, basically like I'll just try to get like, you see there's still like a conflict of like shape here that I have to really like insist it. Okay, so I kind of like have like my different like shapes figured out here. So the next thing that I'm going to want to do is create the final mesh. So like, and by when I create the final mesh, what I do is I separate my elements by polygroup so that I get like a crease that will separate all my harsh plane changes. So like using slice curve here, I'm going to just like draw like where the well those things are, right, like this. It's not in symmetry, so I'll often just use like you can find it here, like oh no, actually no, it's in I have it as a shortcut. So geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. Mirror and weld will just replicate one side to the other. Since it's not the right side, you need to mirror first, then mirror and weld. Of course, I have all those in hotkeys that I just do on my keyboard real quick, or in this like menu here. Exactly. So then I will hide this piece. I will like make the other like plane changes, the important plane changes, and again mirror, mirror and weld. So now I have like all my planes defined in different shapes here. Since the outline is very jagged, it might actually not help ZBrush to create a topology. So I'm just going to want to smooth the outline here a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask the border. So you see mask by feature that you can find in just like the masking tools here. Mask by feature comes with 3 options: border, group, and crease. I don't want to do that to my groups. I just want my borders, like the silhouette of the shape. I click on it. Now it's masked. I can invert the mask and just like use polish and deformation, and then like it's much more smooth. So it's going to help the algorithm basically. And the algorithm, I'm going to use ZBrush. That's going to be in. So I have my shortcuts and I always forget where things are. ZBrush, it's here. I'm going to click on freeze groups. No, keep groups. There you go. Here, and I'm going to ZBrush to a total of like 1,000 polys, which is clicking here. 1 ZBrush, and I have this here. Sometimes it gives you that kind of stuff. That's why sometimes I love to run ZBrush 2 times. Now it kind of like busted it. So in order to fix this, sometimes you can just like move by hand where you want things to be, and it'll just like make the algorithm understand a little bit more like what you're looking for. So you kind of like have to give it like a certain like a certain push, and it might actually help. So ZBrush like this kind of like busted it. So I'm gonna try the same idea, but staying like this before. And to be honest, this is kind of like it kind of like sucks that it's like, oh, it's not working during the presentation. But the reality is that like most of the time it works well, and it's just a question of like sometime removing things that could be just like hard to read for him, like this little like spike here and this thing. Like those like small things, sometimes they'll make like an entire difference. So I'll just try again. Okay, I think there's something. Yeah, there was something hidden. Sorry. ZBrush. It's already better. Like this is kind of like bothersome that there's like so many lines here, but it's really not going to change like the outcome of my mesh at the end of the day. So like this is already something that I can work from. This loop is kind of like bothering me, so I might like remove it quickly. Yeah, that's like cleaner. And this is literally going to be like my final mesh. So once that I have this here, I'm just going to spend a bit of time to kind of like, actually, I'm going to mask it. Come on. There you go. So I'm just going to spend a little bit more time just to to make it a little bit more clean, even if it's in a lower subdivision level like this. I'll do this for like each shapes. And like I won't go more into detail because I just need to move on from this demonstration, but I'll do this for pretty much like everything. Then I will add a panel to this, which will add the thickness. Panel is in panel loop here, edge loop, panel loop. So, but me, I just have those options here where I turn pretty much everything to off, and I just choose like a certain thickness. That's too thick. I'll change it to this. Like this is pretty much, this is reasonable, but it kind of like split my elements into like many like different pieces, which I don't want this. So I'll just tell him ignore groups, and now I'm good. So I have like a thickness with a clean mesh here. So at this point, I can pretty much like start to subdivide my model to get like close to like my clean mesh. If I would have spent more time cleaning this thing here, I wouldn't have like this lip, this little bump over here. So this is like just like being careful with your mesh, but you can also like clean it at this stage. It's always good to keep it clean, like at all levels. Yeah, like this surface here, like you can see like this surface is kind of like warping on itself. It's not very like sci-fi clean plane. So like this is something I would have like insisted to get like clean before adding the panel loop. Why? Because if I start to do it now, of like trying to get like this like to be like a good clean plane, like I'm kind of like busting like my edges here, or like
You're
this
fighting
edge
it
here.
now.
Exactly, which can be fixed by simply like hiding and try to fix, but it's always better just to be like a bit more diligent in the extra step. Not too much, but like just a little bit like would help. But at this stage here, before I actually like did all of this, so you can also like decide on like having like keeping creases. Like for example, like if like this like change of plane is supposed to be not that round, you might want to actually like had a crease on this, and creases basically will just keep things like really sharp. There's an option to just have all your polygroup create a crease, a hard edge basically. It's in polygroup here somewhere. It's called polygroup by, no, sorry, it's in
Do you use
crease. That
creases
is
quite a bit?
here. Oh, all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
Polygroup increases, like this right there is like the foundation of like my technique. It's just that like it's mixed with a lot of like hand adjustment. Like you saw me making sure that the surfaces are clean. That I do it by hand. It's not like topology and having the quads well placed and then like your subdivision like makes it look clean. Is like, no, I clean by hand because like I have so much more control on the shapes that way. But like having like the creases all clean and the thickness well calculated, it's so easy with this technique that I don't do that by hand. Like it's just like so easy. But yeah, crease here there's crease polygroup. I kind of like lost where it was.
You probably have it on a hotkey,
Anyways,
I'm imagining.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Crease polygroup. I'll just use my hotkeys now because I feel like I'm wasting time finding buttons where you can just go and like ZBrush
You'll find
document and
them.
like they'll tell
Yeah.
you where all the buttons are. But like if you crease your polygroup and you choose like one level of crease, so your first subdivision, like I'm doing a subdivision now, it stays hard, and the next subdivision now it's going to start to actually like round off. You see, there's like a little rounding here, and like the more you subdivide, it will stay like hard where the creases were, but you created like that little like bevelly like thing here that light can capture, and it gives like that sci-fi effect to it. So I find it actually is like works pretty well. And from there you can actually do a lot of like other maneuvers for your detailing, like taking like this edge, you can shorten it, mask it, revert it, inflate it. I'll use like this little technique here to inflate. You just have your move transition, your move transpose bar, and you right click on the extremity, and it does like this little like, it does like an inflate. So basically, you're just like adding like a little like trim
Nice little
detail
lip.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then the rest of like all the shapes is either like mask moves or alphas. Like mask moves, they're basically things like, I love to just like take, for example, like this shape like this. Say like this here. And this, I'll just like move it. So you take your move brush, you make sure that your radius is not going further, like too far, but you can just have it like this. And oops, you can push it. And I'm going to use Alt, so it pushes it like in the direction of the normal. And you can actually like have like all those like lip details thing. Not lip, sorry, but like kind of like mid detail, I should say. I love to use mask for moving meshes. Like even like sometimes I might actually just like do something drastic like this. You're just masking like a portion of it, and you can basically just like Just
Yeah.
like move your object like this. You cannot move it like too much. You have to be careful because there's no resolution on like
Yeah.
this edge that you're creating, but still like you can create like a lot of details this way, and I find that it works pretty well. So it's just really a matter of experimenting. Like there's so many things you can do like in ZBrush. It wouldn't like 2 hours to explain all of that would not be enough. Like you wouldn't need like an entire class of like a month to go through like all
Yeah.
the techniques you can do. But if you explore like what masking are, what polygroups are, like ZBrush is such a good sandbox software to actually like play with everything. So yeah, it works pretty well in that regard. And then
Yeah.
after that, like alphas, just to like give some like
I was
more
gonna say, yeah. There they are.
like yeah, I have like a library of alphas that I use all the time, and it's just a matter of like choosing a few alphas and making sure that like you stick with like a few of them, so there's like a certain redundancy and or echoing between
Hmm.
them, and it's just a matter of like knowing like how to use them. Like sometimes you can actually like have them like be like super big and become like by itself a mid detail, or you use them like super small and you just like have them like just be like a little like detail like on the end of something, or I don't know. But yeah, it's really 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 just a matter of like figuring out like visual language, like what you like and that sort of stuff. Yeah, so if you do that but you actually take your like maybe 4 times more time that I did right there, you'd have something that look like, well, like this, like what I did at the end. Yeah. There you go.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
We did
that.
get a question about advice you would give to a beginner, somebody who's just starting. How can you, or what advices would you give to them for somebody who's just getting started, whether it's in art or getting started in 3D, and they want to pursue character modeling or getting into this kind of stuff?
Well, I think that it's the boring answer of like start with anatomy, because the thing is that like there's so much study that's been done in anatomy to try to explain why things are a certain way, and though I feel that like the way that we kind of like learned anatomy explains a lot about the world in general, and like just in terms of like how like muscle work, how they actually like pull on the bones and to retract into the this, and how the muscle themselves they change and how it influences the surface on top. It goes through like so many like aspects of life, and even in created life like robots, like this theory actually translates. So it's really a great place to start. Plus, when you study anatomy, you study like figure and like
Hmm.
shape also at the same time. So after that, you just need to like start from there and to tell yourself like, okay, well, where do I go from organic to hard surface? And it's just a matter of like I said at the end, it's treatment. Well, hard surface, it's more planar. It's more like defined faceted planes, whereas like nature is more like organic and constantly changing. Even if like the plane they exist, they're there. If you synthesize the shape, you'll see that there are like planes, but
Hmm.
they just like round off more and whatever. So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, planes are everywhere. It's just that organic, they're rounded off, and mechanical, they're kind of like there. Like the planes are visible, like without any rounding or whatever. So there we go. Like just to do like a shoulder, like I'll grab this
Hmm.
guy, I think, here. Okay, well, I don't have a. Okay, whatever. I'll just take this guy here. So, like, just like having like like a shoulder, how it's like constructed. Like you're gonna like if you act when you study like anatomy, you'll figure out like what you need to do to actually like have the muscle look credible, right? But oops, I changed the mesh. But once that you have like your shape like in place, like I'll concentrate on the shoulder here, like this. Like hard surface is really just like a matter of like, okay, well, okay, there's a plane here, there's a plane like this, but once that you have the mass, then you can like insist maybe on like the angles. And if you actually like if you insist a lot on the angles, you'll end up like with giving a more hard surface look to what you're doing. But the approach is still organic. It's still, you create a mass, and at some point you go like more plane, less curves if you want to do something mechanical, and more rounded off if you want to do something organic. But even like having your planes like this can be like a step into making something organic, just because you synthesized your shape correctly. So this is really something where like every time that I teach, I try to insist on telling people, when you start something, do not bother yourself too much with the fact that it's organic or mechanical. Like, don't be like, or at least I speak for myself, and I hope it can help people, but like, don't tell yourself like, oh, I'm doing a robot, so I'm going to open Maya, or oh, I'm doing a human, so I'm going to open ZBrush. It's like,
Right.
they're just tools. They're not like, there's not one that's like the robot software and like the human software. It's basically just like tools that help you do a result. Do you want to have rounded edges or sharp edges, or like rounded planes, or like planar planes? And
Right.
one of them is going to serve a certain visual language, the other another one, and that's what it is in the end, right?
When you do decide to do a hard surface character, one of the questions we got, which is, are there things or rules that you consider specifically for hard surface once you decide like this is what it's going to do, or is it kind of like what you're saying, where that's not?
It's back to what I was saying. It's the same
Yeah.
answer. It's just like there's a visual language that actually tells if something is sci-fi or like sci-fi or hard surface. It can be hard surface past, hard surface really future, and it's really just about like the design of things, like
Yeah.
having, like I said, having lines that go like diagonal, then straight, then diagonal is like, ooh, that's very sci-fi. I haven't done much. I just
Mm-hmm.
drew a line, but it's like, yeah, well, that line is more sci-fi than the other. So you're going to try to have this. You're going to try to have that in your silhouette. Like, you see, this line exists in my
Mm-hmm.
silhouette right there. And this is just like a choice that I made, so that like it always like pushes thing in the sci-fi direction. It's
Totally.
really just what it is. Visual language.
When you're speaking of visual language and just like the amount of like getting to a final model, how do you decide when you've added enough detail, or how do you decide or know when you've added too much detail?
I just decide of a key angle, and I'm like, okay, well, this is like as close as I'm going to get to present this character. Do I need
Mm-hmm.
to go further into detail? Like, no, by this example here, I was like, yeah, probably don't need to put fabric here. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I knew that I was going to print this character in a format that was not going to require the micro detail. So I was like, it's enough details. I don't need more detail than that. So if you're talking about a video game, basically it's just like, okay, well, is it a video game where you're going to have a conversation with this character? Like, is the camera going to go like full size like here or not? And sometimes your lead on the project can tell you like, well, this guy, we're never going to have a conversation with him, so you don't even need to
Yeah.
put like the details there. And
Right. You
also
don't have
like
to.
yeah, exactly. So talk about efficiency once again. Often when I actually work as a company, like I'll ask like those kind of questions like to the people, like, is this character going to be often seen? Like, is it like a corpse on the ground, or is it actually a character walking around? Or is it a character you can have a conversation with? That's going to change a lot of things. Actually, and it's not to actually say anything bad about that game, because it was a good game, but I've played recently Control, and I
Mm.
know I'm kind of like late, but I tried Control recently, and I thought it was fun. But I found it really funny that like like it took me hours into the game to realize, hey, I don't even know the enemies look like what, because I always kill them when they're super far and I don't know what they
Yeah.
look like. So I actually went and looked at a character up close, and I was like, oh, they're like humans. And I because I just saw them as like a small shape in the background, and I look at it really closely, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of detail in the characters. Like, it did a decent job. It's really great. But I was like, I've never noticed it, and I was like, wow.
Right.
Talking about efficiency, if these, I don't know how much time they spend doing these characters, but like knowing that you cannot have a conversation with an enemy and that they just dissipate into the air when they die,
Mm-hmm.
like there was no reason to actually make them complex in that sense, right? I don't know if they knew that when they started production, but talking about efficiency, Jesus. There's one scene that you can have an enemy that doesn't evaporate because they're looking at an object, and you can actually like go like super close to them and look at them, and that's the only time. So I'm
Interesting.
like, wow. Anyways, so Yeah, knowing the amount of detail is really just knowing what you're going to do in the end. And if you want to do a study of detail and have it really detailed, well, here's your excuse to go like balls out and do like a lot of details. But if you're like me and you like to like finish something and then do something else, it's better to know like what you're going to try to accomplish with it and to not do too much. So no back of the character. If you're never going to show the back, that's another thing, right?
Totally. That's kind of maybe a good segue into one of the questions you got, which is, well, there's two. One we'll answer quickly, which is not the real question, which is quickly, what was the total poly count for like this total character? Do you remember?
Yeah,
With
300
the horse,
million.
300
We have
million ish.
300
Cool.
million, and because I haven't put much like detail in it, or else it would have go high to 400-500 million
Right.
polys. Yeah, easily.
The other one was just general tips or principles for concept design in ZBrush. Do you have any tips for people who want to get into that stuff versus doing 2D?
Well, I think that the really important thing is to start with like shapes. You're not going to want to separate your model into like many elements at first. You're really going to try to actually like have like your one mesh and explore as much as you can with like this one single mesh, because
Mm-hmm.
like this one single mesh you can actually like explore a lot from it. Like if I take another one of the characters here, like War, uh,
Mm-hmm.
like this shape here like already like illustrates like a lot of what I'm going for in terms of like what I want this general shape to be. And you see like it's maybe not descriptive to exactly what it is, but like there's like I've actually drew like where like the cavities like they could be and like where separations could be, and having also polypaint illustrate what are the separations, so that like
Mm-hmm.
if I look at it to in like a full size, I pretty much have like a good feeling of what I'm going for. Like it already tells a lot. Like this, it's super simple, but like it's really all there, and it can all change. But having like making it simple with yourself and working on one object might actually be at your like at your service more than anything. And yes, it might require you to learn how to like control the shapes and really like for example like this like angle here, be able to kind of like make it more like insist on it, or like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like creating like some kind of like thickness really quick, like those things here. Like it's really worth to just experiment with the brushes and to see like how you can create shapes quickly, even if they're unclean, even if they're like not really there. Like you'll get a lot from just like a quick blocking like this in terms of like the looks of it. And try not to really to insist too much on like one part of it. Try to work on the whole character as like as a whole is also going to help. And at some point you're going to stop working and you're going to be like, okay, I can already read a lot from this character. And
Mm-hmm.
then like you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to add something on top. It's going to be completely disconnected from the character. Like for example, it's armor. Well, then now I'm going to add a new subtool. So I'm going to like duplicate this guy and like work on something else, like duplicate it. Maybe I'm just going to change the poly paint to be all red for a second. And like now they're like superposing those two, so I'll just like inflate negatively the guy. So when I actually bring him back, the mesh is like inside like this. So now I can actually just like start like thinking of like, okay, well, there's going to be a like some like armor here. I'm going to work on like a bigger shoulder that's going to go on top. And it's the same. It's just like you first add the mass, and it's going to look like nothing because it's going to be so soft at the beginning, but like you'll know like how much like bigger you want to create like this character when you just like add mass like this, whatever. And then the moment that like you have like your mass, you can start like for example like the edges, like I said, mass, edges, and then surface. So you can already start to draw like maybe like the you see like it's funny, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like drawing over like some errors, like some not errors but like some accidental like volumes and stuff, and you can basically discover like your shapes and stuff. So you see like now I have like something I made like a capsule shape. So now I could be like, hey, you know what? Maybe this could actually be like a tank or something like that.
Mm.
So I'll just do something, and now I'm going to use a little technique here with like trim hole, like if you have the right angle, it does like those kind of things. So now you can actually like start to use like some of the techniques, to add visual language. But you see like what I just did right there is like using that trim hole technique is not like foundational to like designing. This is just like a trick I know in ZBrush to do like a little effect. but the more you know of those, the more you can do like little intricate things. But what I did about like creating the volume here is the main aspect of what you want to do in ZBrush, adding mass, and like you see, I actually drew like some line, but I'm not even happy of like the side view, so I'm just gonna go back into like shaping the masses, that sort of stuff, and from there I'll just do that until I have something complete that would look like well, my character. Well, this one is final. I'm just trying to find my my posed blocking. Whatever. Oh yeah, he was here.
Yeah, I think my internet blipped out for a minute.
No worries.
Yeah, this is awesome, dude. This is super cool. I love that. I use a very similar process, which is like the inflating, and it's such an easy way to explore your shapes once you have
Yeah,
a really great starting point.
yeah, exactly. I just like it because the goal in ZBrush is just to like to go as fast as possible in order to get like an idea of something. And often what I'll do is that I'll actually take a screenshot of this, and I'll go like in Photoshop afterwards and maybe like draw over like a few like maybe like details or ideas that I know maybe would take a little bit of time in ZBrush to do. Like I might actually explore like for example, like let's say like I would like there's like something about this visual language here. Like I'm just gonna take like, for example, like take a screenshot like this with like snag it, but you can actually have anything. Then I'm gonna jump like in Photoshop really quickly. Normally I would have it open, a new file, click create because it's already using the resolution of my save, and then I can actually like start to kind of like, I'm gonna use red so you can see well, but like I would be using something else in red for sure. RGB, don't flatten. So like maybe like I'll start to like explore like that kind of like stuff.
Hmm.
Like okay, I want to have this here. I want to have like two holes like this. I want to have like a repeated pattern like this here. So on one layer and then another one. So you can do this also, but it's great that you actually have already your shape in ZBrush because your shape I find defines already a lot, and then you can
Yeah.
bounce back to 2D afterwards. So yeah, is there any question? Oh, by the way, I know we're like 4 already, but like if
Yeah. Well,
there's a little bit of, I don't mind doing a little bit of overtime.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. We can go over a little bit. We had some more questions. Somebody was just saying tips on posing. It's usually the last thing to do, but sometimes it can kill the character. You know,
Oh yeah, it can for sure. There's a yeah. It's sad to say, and I hope I'm not like hurting anyone by saying that, but it's true. Sometimes I see characters and like people posed it, and I'm
yeah,
just like, yeah, it wasn't to its service really. It's really hard to pose. It's really like another like science by itself. Um, but I find that like something that's really important when you're posing, a few elements. Well, first of all, this is like the blocking pose, so it was refined later, but the idea is there. Posing, first of all, you need to have one angle that's your master angle, like the angle that you're going to be like, if I have to put this character on a poster, this is going to be the angle, because you're not always going to be able to have all the pose look as striking. So you're going to want to have one that's actually like really the one pose. So for this character, it was this. Unbeknownst to me, I figure out like later, I realized that there was like other poses that I really loved from him. Um, like maybe some that I even like better than this one. Like this one, like I really love
hmm,
like this one as well. I actually worked it so there's no like overlapping, or there's less overlapping, but I really like this one here, like this little thin triangle shape that it creates. So one, yeah, you're gonna want to have like one angle that's the best, but you're gonna also want to make sure that like there's at least two or three other angles that it works well, and not just so you have two or three other angles, but because sometimes you're going to place the character in one angle, but when you actually turn it into another angle, it feels like he's like falling forward or falling
yeah,
backwards, and you're never going to want to have this. You want to make sure that your character looks like he actually is not currently falling down. So you have to just look at your character from the third person, maybe rest your eyes a little bit, like come back to it in 15 minutes or a day and look at it. And like if you're like, oh, that character is falling forward, and then
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's not. Like even if like this character is leaning forward, like he has like its weight on like his foot right here. And so like it's not like if it actually is going to fall forward. Like he's fine right now, even if he's leaning forward. So you kind of like have to go. It's kind of like a cheap answer, but like I really go with the feeling. Like if I feel he's falling forward, I know there's something wrong, and I'll just work at it and try to figure out like what would I do as a human being if I just didn't want to fall in that direction, and I try to actually like get there. So I'll have my main angle. I'll like turn it like 90 degrees, make sure it's good in that. Turn it like 90 degrees, make sure it's good. 90 degrees, 90 degrees, like back to front. 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, like almost like this until like it feels like in all angle it actually works well. This is for the balance. But like if you want to talk about composition, you're going to have to take care of composition in all angles as well. Like this character here, I've changed it a little bit, but the idea was to actually have like my center point is like here. Actually, I'll move it here. My center point is like here, and like all the lines are going in that direction or like that direction. So like everything is like centering, like yeah, exactly. They're all coming out from like here. This line here is kind of like breaking this idea. It's a little bit like angled differently, but this was for like serving another purpose. But technically, like that's what I wanted to do with like the shapes of this character here. And from this angle, it was the same thing. Like lines needed to actually like go in that direction like this. Whoops, I moved it. So in terms of composition, you're going to want to have to do this, and you're going to want to make sure there's no like one part of the model that just doesn't like have like anything. You want it to just like look full in every angle. So sometimes like adding, sometimes I'll be adding just a little like something. I'll go back to death for a second, but like just that little like thing that sticks out here was just basically because there was like a space here that I was like, yeah, I kind of like need to redirect the eye like in a certain direction, so I just added it there. And I could have like added something. You see, this was more like a question of like not having too much props for like the cost of the model, but like I could have like added something like right here just to close the shape, because like the space here is not serving me any purpose. Sometimes space can serve you a purpose, but sometimes you need to just add something. Anyways, and also like the movement of things that I really try to have it also as much as I can. Like here, there's like it's like a spiral shape, like a you see it's like starting from here, it's going there, then it's actually like going to that line, riding on the arms right there, the head, second head, then the shape of the body right here. So like standard composition rules, they actually also help like when you pose a character, at least in like your key frame or a few of the key frames, I would say. That's another good tip.
Yeah, kind of always working in the round, but knowing you're going to have a couple key poses or angles that like you really want the viewer or to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And to like, and the thing is like if you work many angles and they work well together, you'll know that like your entire flow of your character in 3D will work well. Like so yeah, the general rule is if you can have like one angle, side angle, and top angle to look good, like technically all the other angles should by default also be good, because you've kind of like answered like the concerns of like your three main like views.
Yeah.
Like fucking it's 3D, so
Yeah,
that's what it
exactly.
is.
Yeah,
So
XYZ.
if you're doing like a tentacle, like a tendril or tentacle that's like flowing like this, like I will actually look at that line flow in front view, side view, top view, and the moment that like all of my views they're like all equally good, normally all the other views they work. It's like magical in a sense. Like you have to be careful, you have to second guess yourself a bit, but like it kind of like works like this. And also something else that I forgot to say is when you're posing a character, I totally forgot to say this, but like people were asking like what about like the flexion and this and that. The reality is that there's a lot that I leave to the posing. Like when it's about like anatomy, like if the muscle is going to really change after the flexion and the muscle is visible, like often I'll actually like work the anatomy at the end. and not like in the middle. And if there's like cloth, I might actually like do maybe like I'll do that part of the shirt in like in pose, but I'll do like the shirt, like I'll do the clothing in its final state, at least around some areas, because I know it's going to be so influenced by the movement, and I know the areas that I'm going to have to be careful with because I already posed the blocking of the character. So I already know like what areas are going to be like sensitive or that sort of stuff. And sometimes I'll even work it and rework it, like the wrinkles on the arm here. Like, okay, this is the decimation. It's not the final model. Like I said, this is just a decimation for the moment. But these wrinkle here didn't exist before I posed it, but pretty much everything else existed. So I always assume that there's going to be some parts that I need to fix after I posed, at least in the joint areas, like elbow,
posing isn't
shoulders.
the final step. You got to do a lot of cleanup and adjustments and cloth and final details and compressions and all that stuff. That makes sense.
Yes.
Couple quick
exactly.
questions
But
from
you're
the
going to
chat.
have, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you're just going to have like a such advance if you actually did a lot with symmetry before you actually just like do the non-symmetrical stuff. Anyways, yeah.
Asking if it was better to model in Maya and then import into ZBrush. You do a lot of stuff in ZBrush. Do you use Maya or any traditional package that often?
No, zero.
No.
I never. Everything the mesh is done with ZRemesh. Like you see, this is exactly like what I showed you earlier. Like this is like ZRemesh that created me this mesh, and it's pretty clean. It's clean enough for me. Panel loop to create my thicknesses, so I never needed to do that. Some shapes, it's really just like drawn by hand. Well, okay, it's missing the top part of his face, but you see, these angles were completely sculpted from a mesh that the topology is like, who cares? The only reason why this is not a Dynamesh is because I like that when I move, it can kind of like low res my mesh temporarily, and then when I release it, it up reses it back, and it just helps for the whole scene to be more smooth. But this could have been like just a Dynamesh, and like I wouldn't have cared. This is for like objects that are maybe don't have thicknesses or that sort of stuff. But like you see, like this like spear here. This is like I started from like a rectangle that I just shaped correctly, and then at some point I just like smoothed it so it becomes round with the smooth tool, and at some point I just remeshed it so it's not, like I said, like a Dynamesh or something. And some objects, it's basically just created from a cylinder that I placed there. And something that like people might actually find interesting. Some shape, like for example, like the gauntlets, because of the model is placed like in a certain natural way. Like if I want to have my gauntlet that's actually like symmetrical, sometimes what I'll do is I'll work on like assets on the side here. You see, like this is like is greaves, and here is like is
in like its own scene, or like just a separate subtool. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's his own scene. And when I'm going to be done with this, I'm basically just going to like merge everything into one file, and I'm going to put it like in my scene and maybe like unmerge and reconstruct subdivision, some like parts of it, just so it's like on the character that is posed instead. Like I'm really looking forward for ZBrush for Pixelogic to make the local symmetry, so I don't have to do this. But like for the moment, like that's what I have, and to make sure that like it works when I place it back. There you go. You see, like this was my blocking, and I placed it like here. I placed it straight. I made it symmetrical, and then like I worked it over, so I know that like when I'm going to take my non-blocking back, it's going to fit like somewhat perfectly over everything.
Yeah, it will replace the piece pretty well. We're getting a lot of questions, but we're definitely also starting to run out of time, and we're already over. So I'm going to hit a couple quick ones that we'll just hit really fast. One was, do you use Geometry HD?
No.
No. Got it.
Next question.
Then, yes. What exercises were you doing in the library?
I'm going to have to interrupt you. You kind of like froze for 6 seconds. So since the beginning of the question, basically.
Okay, cool. What exercises were you doing at the beginning of your career?
I was actually opening ZBrush, taking all the brushes and just like doodling around with it, and just to see like what was the reaction of the brush, just to know like what I can expect from it and that sort of stuff. And then the brush that I found interesting, I put it on the top here, and I was just like often just like seeing like, hey, I was gonna react to this, and then I understood some principles like this brush is really like gonna like inflate my mass. Others like just gonna push it upwards, and just because I know now the behaviors of most brushes, I kind of like know which brush I'm gonna need to have like the effect that I need. Um, this was one thing that I did. The second one was anatomy. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
anatomy, you can learn so much things from anatomy. And like, you know me, I'm not even like an anatomy guy. Like I don't create insane anatomies and that sort of stuff, but I at least know it enough for like me to be comfortable with like what it can teach. So for me, like that was like really important to have like a good foundation with anatomy. And then the other one would be observation. Like often I'll just like look at like references and try to understand what I find appealing in that reference, and I'll work with a reference, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll do a character and I'll just try to replicate what I see in the reference, but adapt it to my style at the same time. And this is just to say that like observation really helps. So the whole thing about placing lines on lips, or like having little edges, or like just like how like a line will angle to make something sci-fi, is all like observation things that I found on like other people's work, and that sort of stuff. So observation also, and observation in real life also, or just like listen to documentaries about like how things are made, and you'll just like learn stuff that are useless in real life, but they're just like great in general, and you'll remember them when it's time to work on your things. So yeah, that's something
Awesome.
that really helps.
Well, Marco, I super appreciate you being here. This was an amazing stream. Got to see a lot of cool stuff that you do. I really especially like seeing your thought process. You were calling it a very non-professional document, but I think it's actually cool to see that sort of stream of consciousness, like how something is made, because to me that's one of the things that it's the non-visible part. It's the non-tangible part of like actually producing your portfolio or producing stuff like that. And I thought it was cool to see your process of doing all that stuff, and it's been really great having you on here.
Well, I really appreciate it. Seriously, if we had another 2 or 3 hours, I could run through like so many more things. Like I feel like I've just even like touched like the tip of the iceberg, like in
Yeah.
terms of like all my knowledge and everything. So I really hope people appreciated that, because I know I'm scatterbrained sometimes and I just go left and right and talk about like anything. But seriously, like if we get to do something like that again, I would try to fill in the other things that I was not able to
Well,
to
we'll have to have you on
explain.
a stream again. I think that's all
Yeah,
that's all we're saying. We'll just have to do it again.
yeah, of course. Oh well, you know what? That one might be the good occasion to talk about something.
Yeah.
So like a few things. Well, first of all, I mean, you can like I guess you're going to give out like links on how to reach me.
Mhm.
Basically, I'm on all the social medias, and same thing for the company, for Chaos Masons. Um, I've been doing a lot of sculptures recently that like I'm trying to actually have produced. Pretty much everything is going in the right direction. So for people that like are waiting after some stuff, just know it's like it's gonna happen. It's just like things. Sometimes they take time, but like I'm really into making a lot of stuff these days. I'm trying to really get serious, and I have a few like collaborators and other people to help me. So just like stay tuned. Things are gonna happen. If there's anybody professionally that wants to work with us, you can contact us. I mean, we're extremely busy, but like we're always happy to have opportunities. For sure, if there's people that want to work for us, please send us your ArtStation profile, and like we'll absolutely look at it. We have our producer that like takes care of like all of that. And also, if people are interested, I'm like about to be able to start doing a Twitch. Okay,
Ooh.
so like I'm gonna try to make it like weekly, where
Mhm.
like I'm gonna just be working. It's gonna be very casual. Like it's gonna be me at night after like my kid is to bed, and just be on my computer, and like instead of just working on my personal stuff alone, I might like connect once a week, maybe some like 2 times a week. I still don't know. I have no idea. I kind of like started to understand what Twitch is and like how to do it. But I figured out that like it could be fun to just like do my process and have people watch and to answer questions and that sort of stuff at the same time. So I just need to figure out how I'm going to do it. But the pieces are there. So if you go on my socials, you'll see that there's actually a Twitch link as well, so you can follow me there already, even if there's no videos. At some point there will be some.
Get those notifications for when you end up going live.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to build an audience. And also, like, everyone go subscribe to our Twitter, because our Twitter numbers, they suck. And we have to actually have this get a little bit higher.
You got to have it. That's awesome.
Yeah, you gotta boost that Twitter.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for being on the stream. Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you liked the event, which I certainly did, and obviously go follow Marco, you can follow us as well. So you can follow, subscribe on our channel to get more things as well. We'll be having next week on Wednesday, we'll be having Art Jam with Alex Alvarez. He'll be doing basically for 3 hours a very casual stream, making some stuff for a short that he did for the Unreal Fellowship. So he'll be sculpting and then yeah. Marco, we're gonna have to have you guys back on the stream at some point for sure here too. Maybe we'll go on your stream, you go on our stream. We'll trade or something.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be actually great. I want to say hi to Alex. Alex is cool. Hi, Alex.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much again, Marco, for being on the stream. Appreciate it, and we will see everybody next time.
All right.
All right, everybody, have a good day.